Before we get into the episode, please could you do me a favour and hit the follow or subscribe button wherever you're listening to the podcast. You'll be actively helping our community to grow and for us to reach more people, and it allows us to get great new guests on for future episodes.
Art versus the Algorithm with Will Preisner.
Welcome to episode 8 of Art versus the Algorithm. I'm your host, Will Preisner, and in this episode, I'm joined by Paris-based artist Fabien Dettori. Fabien's work is a unique blend of photography and painting, celebrating imperfection, texture, and what he calls the poetry of life. Together, we dive into his creative journey, from photographing stars at the Cannes Film Festival as a teenager to transitioning into fine art. We'll explore how his techniques like using Polaroids and gold leaf help him capture the invisible moments that define the human experience. By listening to this episode, you'll discover why Fabien believes imperfections make art more meaningful, how the philosophy of wabi-sabi influences his work, and what it takes to stay true to your vision in a world dominated by algorithms and censorship. If you're in Europe, you can see Fabien's stunning art firsthand at his upcoming exhibitions. The first one's in Milan between March the 18th and 22nd, 2025, and the other one's in Berlin between March the 26th and March the 30th, 2025. All the details are in the show notes for the podcast. Before we get started, I've got a few exciting updates to share. First, completing one of the 2025 podcast goals that I have pinned to the top of the podcast Instagram, I've recently launched the Art vs. the Algorithm blog, featuring a new post for every episode, and you can go back and check the previous episodes' blogs as well. You can read the latest post for this episode by visiting www.artversusalgorithm.com. I also want to give a special shout out to Alexia Kombu. She's one of the UK's leading voiceover artists and also an old friend I went to university with. Alexia's lent her incredible voice work to this podcast, and she's even modelled for my photography work in the past. You can find her Instagram and website links in the show notes, and be sure to check out her work, it's incredible. Don't forget, the competition to win an awesome retro camera is still available, just head over to our Instagram at @artvsalgorithm and watch the reel titled Win This Camera to enter for free. But hurry, the competition closes at midnight on March the 17th, 2025, the day this podcast is released, so head over there quickly and good luck. Without further ado, let's get on to episode 8 with Fabien Dettori. Hello, Fabien.
Hello, William.
Can you tell me who you are and describe the artwork that you produce?
Well, I'm Fabien Dettori. I work and live in Paris. I started very young as a photographer, press photographer first. My mother, she's a painter. My father is a photographer. So I'm really the mix between both of them. I'm working first with photography, mostly with large format Polaroids or instant film. And then I paint support, and I paint on them or under them, under the emulsion. I have my own technique. I'm not a nude photographer. I'm much more interested by doing some emotional portraits. And all my influences come from painting mostly. And masters like Lucien Freud or Delacroix or Rodin.
You must have read my mind, because I was just about to ask you what inspires you and your work. Besides what you've already mentioned, is there anything else, whether it be art or other aspects of your life, that inspires your work?
Life itself inspires me. My quest is all about finding the poetry of life and to find it on little gestures, for example, that you usually don't look at, or everything must be authentic in my work. I never ask a model to pose, for example, because to pose would be, for me, the faking life. And so they are living, we are talking a lot. I'm trying to catch those little moments of emotions, and that's what inspires me most. Because I think it's becoming something universal when you're catching those little moments that everybody does, just doing your hair done or just a little and gesture. It's, for me, very poetic when it's uncontrolled. And that's what I'm looking for. It's a quest, yeah.
Can you take me back to the first moment for when you wanted to become an artist and a photographer? Like, what was it that started you on this journey?
I grew up in the south of France, and there weren't so many things to do during the winter over there. Yeah, my first approach with photography was when I was 5 years old, maybe when I used to steal the camera, my father's camera. And I was fascinated by the object and there was something that really moves me or I used to enjoy when I was a kid. Then I started to put a film on it and to catch things. I used to make some photograph of the girls of my school. Later on, the only professional solution for me next to where I used to live was to do the Film Festival of Cannes as a photographer. It was the only way to put one foot into the professional world. And so I was the youngest accredited photographer because I started when I was 15 years old as a professional photographer. And so it was a press job doing some portrait of the stars, of the celebrities who comes to the film festival. So it was great because for me, when you are 15 years old, you're supposed to be at school. And instead of that, you're having parties with Tom Cruise or Eddie Murphy or, those kind of really big stars. That was something. And then the first really moving moment when I tell to myself, okay, this is what I want to do, it was on a trip in America with my parents. I was maybe 16 years old. I made a snapshot on this gas station in the middle of nowhere. I can remember this feeling of, oh, wow, this is what I want to do. Because when I made this photograph, it reminds me the Baghdad Cafe film from Wim Wenders, this kind of melancholic landscapes. I still can remember this feeling of this emotion where I say, oh, this is really what I want to do. And then I came to Paris when I was maybe 19 years old to do some press for the beginning, like kind of paparazzi. But it wasn't for me. I was partying much more than I was working. So I started to work as a studio assistant, where I had the chance to work with Paolo Roversi or Patrick Demarchelier, or I was their first studio assistant at the Pinup Studios, which were some famous studios. And so there I started to learn light, how to create some lights, to learn about the materials. And I was quite good at it. So I became the first assistant. And then after a while, a fashion photographer. At that time, the budgets were very good into fashion. And so it was great. But, I'm much more interested by painting and about the interpretation of life. So selling clothes wasn't my kind of thing after a while. So I quit fashion to embrace a career as an artist.
And how did you find that transition from moving from a fashion photographer into an artist?
Well, it was quite risky because I used to earn some money, but I wasn't I wasn't myself. Into the fashion business, you're barely not yourself. It's a kind of superficial world. It's great, but it wasn't for me after a while. And so, yeah, as an artist, you have to be totally unconscious, I think. Every day you make a reset. And so you have to be unconscious because financially, sometimes I used to have only one chocolate bar to eat. But I think I didn't have the choice. When you want to be an artist, you have no choice. It's the way you have to be. I can't do anything else anyway.
Can you explain in more detail what you mean by you have no choice?
Yes, because I tried some other job, but I always get fired. So, no, it wasn't for me. I think it's a state of mind. You are born like that. I've been raised a bit like into an artist family. So it's kind of a destiny, or that's the only way I can feel happy, or I can be really myself, express myself. And I tried lots of jobs and nothing works.
Is it like a force that's pulling you?
Yeah, in fact, I don't think I really think about that too much. It's just the way it is. You just have to accept it. And of course, it's ups and downs, and it's a kind of rock and roll life. But I truly believe that if you work a lot, things happen. There is no mystery. I mean, if there is some work, And if you like what you're doing, maybe some people are going to like it too and buy it, and gives you freedom to continue. So yeah, that's my mindset. My mindset is to always go forward, never look backwards, and to try to do my best. Even if I'm never satisfied about my work, I always try to improve.
As both a photographer and a painter, how do these two mediums balance in your work? Does one kind of take precedent or priority over the other?
No, for me, photography is a tool, painting is a tool. So it's all about inspiration. It's all about instinct. Francis Bacon used to say, how do you explain your inspiration? And he used to reply, trying to explain the inspiration is trying to explain instinct. You can't. And so that's the instinct that leads me. And of course, I've got technical skills. And so I know how to drive the instinct, or I'm waiting for the accident. That's where the poetry of life is into the accident when you're painting. And those two mediums, photography or painting, are just only a tool to express myself, to find the way. I'm always trying to improve my technique, or to find new way, or to find a new support. For example, actually my work is on Polaroids, and large format Polaroids. And I work on a cardboard support. I might work soon on some tests to work on a concrete support. I don't know if I express myself very well, but that's some variation of my work.
So, what do you mean by that? Like, are you transferring your work to those materials?
I mean, I've got this technique that I put the Polaroids on some water with some chemicals. The photographic emulsion, the thin photographic emulsion, peels off the original paper, so it's transparent, translucid gelatins, and that I put on gold, on a support, on a cardboard, on gold. And so they are living with light, the details are coming up. Maybe on the next few months, I'm going to put this thin gelatin on a concrete support, because what I love is texture. To work on texture, it's really important. And why do I work with gold leaf? Is the symbolism, or the approach behind the technique. I work with gold because, as I often say, you can buy cars or houses, but there's something you can't buy, it's time. And to highlight the preciousness of time spent with those models, or the preciousness of emotions, I highlight that with the gold. So there is always a meaning behind my work, or references about painting, even if it's hidden, or I'm quite open to working on different support, but I won't change everything.
How important is experimentation to you as an artist, and for your development as an artist?
Every day I experiment things. I experiment new painting, new pigment, new varnish. There is a lot of parameters, but one of them is patience. I'm very impatient. And so I'm doing everything the wrong way. If you notice the manual of a varnish or a technical thing that, okay, you have to wait 24 hours before work on it. I never do that because I'm too impatient. So I think there is a poetry into the impatience, because when you break the rules, you're going to have some unexpected results. And that's where the poetry for me is. It's into the unexpected things, because life is full of unexpected events. And so I never wait for the varnish to be dry, or the painting to be dry. I'd always add things. It's like a flow. And when I'm working, it's like to be in a trance also. So yeah, I don't try to experiment. I'm experimenting naturally.
Can you expand on how important texture is in your work, and why you try different textures?
When you look at Van Gogh, for example, Van Gogh painting on a screen, okay, it's a beautiful painting. But when you see it firsthand, you can see the brush strokes, you can see the textures. And through that, it's the life of the artist itself that you're experimenting. There is something much more emotional when you see an artwork firsthand. And in my work, the texture means life. Every day you don't wake up in the same mood. Sometimes, the brushstrokes are going to be really violent. Sometimes they are going to be very soft. And so it reflects my state of mind and my life. And that's really a part of my approach. Everything in my work has to be very organic. I know that it's not trendy because nowadays everything is sort of about image and flat digital, and it's the opposite in my work. It's really organic and really close to me. To give you an example, the brushes I use has to have an history. I barely never buy some new brushes. I stole them in my mother atelier studio because they've got an history. In my work, I try to put as much as me as possible.
Does your use of texture as well and a quest to experiment with that and try new things with that, does that help take the photography side of your work away from reality? I mean, just in terms of my personal response to your work, I found that I kind of jump over any perception of who is this person, which I think instinctively can be how we look at images, and jump straight to looking at image as a whole and questioning how I feel. And I was wondering whether like your use of texture and breaking the image down somewhat helps to pull away from the realism in the photography.
Yeah, for me, photography is the first step. I like to say that photography is like literature. You've got a story in front of your eyes and you've got the thing in the air. Into painting, it's the interpretation of reality. So it's much more like music. When you hear music, everyone feels and interprets it differently. And so, yeah, I'm mixing the reality of a photography with my own. It has to pass through the prism of interpretation of life to catch the invisible. I'm much more into catching the invisible, the emotions, poetry that you can find into a painting. And it's becoming much more personal when you're transforming reality into this mix between photography and painting. But I'm painting with light already. All my setup, my light setup is already really painterly. Looks really like a painting. And there is also the fact that a Polaroid is a unique piece, like a painting. So the approach is already like a painter.
You mentioned a little earlier about you found your own technique. And how important do you think it is as an artist to try and find that unique technique to reflect your voice and stand out as an artist as well?
It's a quest. All the artists are looking to have his own style, to have his own technique. And when you look at my work, you can recognize that it's mine. It's a lot of tests, lots of trying, and lots of years. When you see this kind of picture, this kind of artwork, for example, you don't see an artwork. You see years of testing or of experimenting, years of experience. It's lots of work to find your own style. And I think it's the most important thing. And when you find it, you feel, of course, fortunate. I can express myself in my own way and that people can understand and see it. I'm really grateful to all my collectors to recognize this work as a singular, because we are all singular, we are all different. It's very important for me that this work can reflect really who I am, what I see, what I feel in my own way.
Your work is shot in a studio. Is it your studio?
Yes. I've got a house in Paris where I work and live. So there is, it's quite comfortable for me to live and work in the same place. And I've got my atelier here. So yeah, it's really my little world.
So your atelier is in your house?
Yes, my atelier is in my house. It's in the last floor of my house because I need some daylight to work to mix with artificial light. I used to have a big atelier in Paris, and it was just this feeling to go at work, to have this workplace. And so I woke up, make my breakfast, and go at work. And my life, my personal life, and my professional life as an artist is the same. It is very important for me to work in this little bubble. That's where I feel good, even if it's not when you see it. This atelier, it's little, it's tiny, but it's really intimate, and it helps me, I think, to build an atmosphere with the model, or when I'm working on still lifes, it's the same. To put myself into this little cocon.
Yeah. Shooting in a studio and in your atelier, I imagine gives you a ability to sort of control and fully craft what you're doing, as opposed to shooting in an exterior with natural light, reliant on outside elements. You seem to have full control of what you're doing shooting in a studio. How important is that control to you when creating your work?
Well, when I'm working, I'm trying to be hypersensitive. And so I can't. Yeah, the goal is to uncontrol, to have this let it go, to be really open to every little emotions or every little movement. And it's not about control, it's about to be aware, to be open to those little things of life. But there is this Japanese philosophy that helps me a lot, called wabi-sabi. The wabi-sabi, it's a philosophy to find poetry into things worn by time, to find poetry into sadness, to find poetry into all those little things that you usually don't look at. So it asks you to be really open and really hypersensitive, and to find poetry into melancholy, of course, because melancholy, I think it's something common to all the artists. So if you start to control yourself, you're putting some barriers in your mind. It's all about to be free. Freedom is a really important word in my art, yeah, it's all about to be hypersensitive. It's like to be a sponge, and you keep this and up this moment, this light, this color, those tones, this little gesture, the ends, everything.
With regards to your atelier, do you ever invite other people in besides the models that you work with, like members of the public, to see your work or your space?
I invite them to, because on the first floor of my house, there is the atelier where I paint. So I can show them sometimes my technique, to share with them a little behind the scene, but to let them assist to a shooting, for example, when taking the picture. Now it happens once or twice with some journalists, just to show for 5 minutes how it works. But no, this place is quite confidential because I can't work with an audience. I can't make pictures if I have an audience, for example, because it would interfere with the models, or even if it would interfere when I'm doing still lifes. It would deconcentrate me. This is something I really don't do, not usual.
You just mentioned as well about melancholy,
Yeah.
and that you think it has an involvement in most artists' lives. To what extent is that an involvement in your life and your work, and how important is that to your work?
Oh, if we are artists, it's because I think we've got this hypersensitivity. And yeah, there is a lot of poetry in melancholy, but you mustn't let it drive. Otherwise, the melancholy could transform into depression. But into the melancholy of life, there is a lot of poetry. When everything goes well in my life, my art is becoming flat. I can't work. And I need to have these moments of breakdown and to look into the darkness to find the light. Melancholy can be something really beautiful. All the most beautiful poems from Rimbaud, Baudelaire comes with melancholia. So it is important to accept this melancholy, even if it's hard sometimes. That's the job. And yeah, to use it, to drive it. It's also risky for sure. That's why lots of artists fall down into depression, which is a difficult disease.
When you said that, it's something that I find very relatable through my own involvement with art. It was like instantly relatable and not something I've talked to with other artists. I talked about with other artists often. So it's fascinating to hear your interpretation on that. And I understand that balance. But a lot of this kind of direction of my own work is fueled by melancholy and my understanding of my own. And that for me is how I pour emotion into my work, which is really important to me. And I wanted to ask you, like, how important emotion and exploration of emotion and involving emotion in your work is.
It's why I'm working with nudity. Why am I into nudity? It's because when you're nude, when you're naked, there is no sign of social class. There is no sign of time. If you wear, even this jacket, you can later say, okay, it's a 2020s era. But when you're nude, there is no sign, and you're getting closer to the authenticity and to the emotions, to the invisible, and to the authenticity of the personality of the person I'm working with. Lucian Freud is very good for that. He wasn't trying to make the people looks beautiful. He was really into life, documenting life, and finding the poetry of life, even into those paintings where the women are. That's the authenticity that I'm looking for. The exploration is emotions. It's simply that I'm documenting life through the invisible. So the emotions are the invisible side. And that's what moves me. Sincerity, this finding the poetry of those moments, of those emotions are a really important quest, because this is what moves me most.
How much are you personally emotionally involved in the creation of your work? Is it important for you to be emotionally involved in it?
Of course, some of my work was made with some women who were part of my life. So, of course, I was like really, really involved into the emotion. It was like a dialogue, a portrait of a moment that I still do with my actual girlfriend. But otherwise, I'm much more with a woman who comes to my atelier. I'm much more an audience, a watcher, a witness of her emotions. Yeah, it's beautiful too. And I'm really grateful to them to give me this trust, to give me this intimacy, because it's quite easy to be naked in front of a photographer. It's harder to be emotionally naked. It asks, lots of time to know each other a bit, to know about their life. It's a process, and trust is really, really important. And then when they gave me genuine emotions, it's echoing with something universal that we all can feel, sadness, all the palette of emotions that we all feel. And it's this mirror effect with the viewer and with me first, and that I'm looking for.
Enjoying the show? Visit our website at artvsalgorithm.com to explore episode blogs, transcripts, and so much more. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram and TikTok at artvsalgorithm. And while you're listening, let us know what you think of this episode by leaving a review on your favourite podcast app.
Do you find that after you finish shooting and you're experimenting with textures and you're using your various techniques, is that just a technical process for you at that point? Or are you still kind of emotionally involved, reacting to things and how it makes you feel? And
you have to forget the technique. I never think about the technique. It's when I'm working, I'm doing the image. And sometimes, the Polaroids are on my atelier for years. And one day I look at it and I say, okay, today it's going to be your turn that I'm going to work on these emotions. It has to be, a click. I try to keep the emotion of the moment of the shooting in a part of my head, to keep it alive and to put lots of passion when I'm working on the paintings. So after the image is done. And I never work because I have to do it. I never work on image because I have to do it. I work on image because it's time to be done. And sometimes, I let my Polaroids unprotected in the atelier. And so they get scratched, they get torn. It's really important for me to work with time as a material. I'm going to show you something. For example, this one.
Mm-hmm.
So this one is a Polaroid I've done in 2017. And so I let it on my atelier. And, it has been scratched. Some parts are gone. But it's still a beautiful and precious moment. So I worked on gold to highlight the preciousness of this moment. And also, I have an oxidized memory. My memory is not so good because there's lots of excess, but we all have oxidized memory. So it's still precious, but to express this souvenir, this moment, which is oxidized in my head, I oxidized the gold too, because it's precious, but it's oxidized, it's old. So it gives those little artworks, which are a piece of memories, like an archaeological jump into my memory. I don't know if I express myself very good, but
yeah, no, you did. It's fascinating to understand like the depth of your process with this, and also the fact you embrace the reality of the situation of your atelier and the history of your brushes. It's fascinating to understand the complexity of the overall creation process for you. And I read during my research that you said that you're inspired by women, which is, to me, is unsurprising looking at your work. What is it about women that inspires you?
I mean, for me, women are symbol of life. Of course, I can't do this work if I was not fascinated by women, all kind of women. But it's about sacrifice too. To give birth, it's something really strong. Really, they are much more involved in their flesh than men does. Of course, and so even with I don't know how to say it in English, but cesarean. I've got a tribute about this in my work, about this sacrifice to give birth, to give life. It's something that inspires me. All women inspires me, and it's a tribute. My work, it's a tribute to women.
And you mentioned keeping cesarean scars and that you like leave bruises or marks on the skin. Like, why is it important to have that authenticity in your work where other people may try and clean it up or remove it?
Because it's all about life, just the authenticity of life. And when you've got a bruise, it's a mark of time. So when I make a portrait of a part of a body with a bruise, for example, it marks a moment. It adds a little history of it. She made that because, I don't know, she had a little bump into a table or whatever. Life is not perfect. The meaning behind this is to also say, things happen, I love wrinkles, for example, because wrinkles is a mark of history. It's our history. It makes us singular. There is this word. Well, okay, I'm going to show you something. I can talk once again the Japanese art and the Japanese art of kintsugi. It's at the 15th century, there is this Japanese emperor who broke his teacup and gives it to his craftsman. His craftsman gives it back, repair with gold. So, this porcelain repair with gold, so teacup. The idea behind this is to say, don't hide your failures because they are precious. You should put them in front, highlight them. So it rings a bell when I discovered that for years I used to destroy my Polaroids in studio to edit them, the bad ones or the average ones. I used to scratch them. But there is a violent gesture to destroy a unique piece of memory as a Polaroid. And so I never put them on a bin. I put them on an envelope. When I found out about the Kintsugi, I take them out and started to fix them with gold. So, for example, you can have those little, these lines with the gold is to highlight also the preciousness of those failures that we are trying to hide sometimes. But the cracks, the wrinkles are precious because they are making us unique, and it's life, and it's beautiful. So poetry. So it's the same approach with the bruise. It's to express that bruises or a scar makes you unique, and it's a part of your history, your own history, and I find it very beautiful.
Yeah, ironically, I had a photo series that I created and named it Kintsugi
All
because
right.
the overriding mistake on my part that I almost just destroyed the whole lot, but then it inspired me to do something completely wildly different with it that I'd not done before and kind of saved it and made it better than I could have imagined in the first place. So there's also a line in an Oasis song which references another Japanese theory that true perfection has to be imperfect.
Exactly.
And that there's that imperfection in your failure. Actually, if you embrace it, can make your work even better than you ever could have imagined, which I found with that. I'm not saying it was groundbreaking. It was just something that for me was a growth, and it made me think differently than I would have done otherwise.
Yeah, and so that's the point, to try to make a picture perfect for me doesn't fit to my work. I will always choose a picture which is full of emotions and perfect than the same picture which is really perfect with the light and really flat. And because it's not life, life is not perfect. Life is full of imperfection, and that's what makes it poetic and precious. And that's real life.
And how does your planning process look? And how do you feel before going into a shoot, taking your planning to the day?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah. I always feel very, very stressed. I always feel insecure. Of course, I'm hiding it and I'm trying to look relaxed and cool, but I'm really stressed. I'm really, insecure is a good word. I always talk a lot before, smoking a lot of cigarettes, drinking a lot of coffees to delay at the maximum the moment that I will have to make the pictures. I always try to do my best because as I said, time is precious. I'm really grateful to those models who gave me their time. I don't want to disappoint them. I don't want to disappoint me. So yeah, it's always a full stress. And as I never know what I'm going to do, I never plan things, because if I plan, it would be like to prepare, to have this temptation to fake it, to fake life, to reproduce, do a setup. So I improvise a lot. And then when the session is over, I feel totally empty. And when I'm alone after people left, I'm quite shaking and feeling really, really, really weak, because I always give 200% of myself to be very open to the emotions. And it's very exhausting. But it's a good sign. If I'm feeling exhausted and weak, it means that I put a lot of myself in it. And so it's good.
That's another thing that I can relate to.
Yeah.
That feeling of exhaustion after having done a shoot.
Yeah.
I suppose it's, for me, I've always thought about, I feel like when I'm doing my work, it's like I'm in a state of flow, and I can't feel any tiredness or fatigue coming in. But as soon as the shoot's over and I'm left alone, I'm suddenly hit with this tsunami of all the tiredness and fatigue. And the fact I didn't stretch before it because I shoot a lot of handheld and I'm in being in tiny positions.
Yeah.
So it's like my body will physically feel like beaten up, which I won't notice during the shoot, but I'll regret in the next few days afterwards.
Yeah.
So I can completely relate to that.
Yeah, I understand, because on my atelier, it's quite tiny. It's a place where I'm doing some pictures. I'm always, torn, and so my back hurts, and it's quite fun. Yeah, one day I should make a video of behind the scene when I'm shooting, because I'm really, might be funny. Like I'm doing
Yeah, it's funny actually. This is reminding me of a conversation that I had when I was younger, because I'm a cinematographer. I've been a commercial cinematographer for a while. And a conversation I had with a mentor of mine, a cinematographer when I was younger, he always said to me, it's probably not a good shot if you're not in an uncomfortable position. And every time I find myself in either my cinematography or my photography in that position, I think of that conversation, because it's so true. It's always like, in order to get the shot I want, I have to be like through the wall or, lying on the floor in an uncomfortable position. I mean, if you just always go for the easy option, then you're not necessarily going to create something that's different and that you're proud of. So,
yeah, but when it's easy, when it's comfortable, to me, it's you have to be involved and to suffer. Oh, yeah, this is something important too, is that I barely never take pleasure doing pictures. It's always painful to me. It's really a mess in my head. It's really a big involvement, psychological involvement. And as I work with some technical camera and a manual, of course, it's there is also this technical aspect, which is quite a thing. So there's lots of little parameters to control and to find your little between that, to find your little space of freedom, space of emotion. It's quite difficult.
I've noticed you've obviously been involved in quite a few exhibitions. How does being involved in those exhibitions benefit both your work and your career? And how do you feel going into these exhibitions, knowing that members of the public and other artists are going to see your work?
It's always great to go and meet people, to go out of my comfort zone. I mean, on my atelier. Last year, it was a great year in my career, because I've done a lot of successful exhibitions in Berlin, in Paris, in New York. So it's always pleasant for me to go and meet the people and to talk about my work, and to have done some performances in New York, doing some pièce unique live at Art on Paper. And it was really interesting to see how people react, because, of course, my work has to be seen firsthand. I can explain why I'm doing this, why I'm doing that, the references about Lucien Freud, Delacroix, Rodin, and why. Of course, there is the financial side, which allows me to work and live. So more and more collectors are buying my art. Yeah, it gives me the freedom to continue and to develop my audience.
And you said that you did like a live art performance. Was that basically doing a shoot?
No, it's not the shooting. What I'm doing, I'm showing my process to transform the photography into painting. This moment where I've got the Polaroid, I put it on some water, I peel off the emulsion, work on the gold and support. Oh, but this one, it was done in New York in front of the audience. So I took the Polaroid and put it on this support with gold.
Is that torn as well?
Yeah.
Amazing.
It's called Le Dévoilement, the unveiling. And it's this little moment when she can take her clothes off or maybe clothes on. It's up to you.
Thank you for showing me this. It's great to actually see what you've created and talk about when you created it.
You're very welcome.
So I want to move on to talk about censorship just a little bit, because it's kind of what this podcast has been born out of. Just first of all, how do you envisage AI will impact your work and career as an artist, and maybe the way you display your work?
Well, art is about the soul. So AI, it's just a tool. It might be a good thing if it just used as a tool, but it won't make an artwork because it's about, the soul, the life, your own history of life, your own experience. This is something very organic. It doesn't scare me at all, or as long as it's just a tool. Of course, there are going to be some stuff into art galleries. We say, oh, look, this is some art made by AI. Wow. No, bullshit. It's only crap. Art is not about that. It's about, your own experience. And you feed art with your own experience, your own life. So no, AI is not something I am scared of. The thing that I'm fighting is the algorithm of the social media platform, because I think it is very dangerous. The algorithm try to sanitize art. It gives the people the same thing, snack content. It's all about la pensée unique. I don't know how to say it in English, but if you show to the new generations only the same thing, they won't know what art is. Imagine the place of artists like Gustave Courbet, of Delacroix, or Rodin, or they would be invisible today, those kind of artists. And they are the greatest of artists of all times. So the dangerosity of the algorithm is to sanitize things, to make it meaningless. Art is about to express or to condemn things, or to go where the others don't, to find things and to make manifestos. So that's the dangerous part. I feel like I am a pirate on Instagram, for example, because I know that one day my account is going to be deleted, but I will make it again. So it's very dangerous. It has to be meta, has to understand that there is no democracy without freedom of art and of creation. And so that's the fundament of a democracy, is that artists should be allowed to show whatever they want, their voice, even if you like or don't like. But the freedom is very important. I am aware that showing sometimes nudity or this part of life of sensuality can be disturbing for kids. But, it would be very, very easy for them to put an option, a button to click, than to restrict by age the audience. But they won't. It's not good for their business to categorize the audience. They are selling ads to a majority people. It's quite dangerous.
So, have you faced any issues of censorship on Instagram of your work?
Of course, of course, that's my daily life. Lots of my posts has been deleted. My account is restricted. So it's very difficult for me to be visible. Today, social media platforms are really important for artists, for everyone to be wants to show your work. I'm not fighting. I'm trying to walk into this mess and to make my own place and try to tell the people, watch out, because every censorship is bad for everyone.
Do you feel any element of your career is under threat by, at any point, Instagram could just delete your account?
No, because I've got on Instagram, there is maybe 0.1% by my work, and there is the galleries. And so Instagram is also a way to make my audience grows, and of course, in a percentage, have more collectors. But if they delete it, lots of us have a second account, a safety account. So we will do it again and again. And I believe that if they are still going this way into censorship, at one moment, they will die and another platform will come up. I've heard that there is two other ones that starts to grow, like Mastodon or something like that. They need artists to content. Instagram is just a platform, but without artists, they are empty. Even if they prefer the era, the trend of our era is about snack content. Some influencers post whatever. So it makes traffic, people scrolls. But I believe it's if, those Instagram skits have grown up now. And so I think they're more aware about the censorship and the bad side of it, the bad effect of it. They might move because everybody needs freedom and they might move to another platform, and Instagram would become like Facebook now, and Facebook is going to become like MySpace. And
yeah, it's probably going to die.
it's going to die if they continue to try to. We are not living in North Korea. We need our freedom. We need our democracy.
Do you think there's any impact on the viewer of your work having to specifically censor your work by like covering nipples or vulva, and other artists are doing that too? What impact do you think this has on people who are looking at artwork that every time they see it, it's modifying the human body?
Yeah, but as I don't have a choice if I want to continue to show my work to my audience, to my collectors, so I have to censor my artworks on the nipples and everything. But I always try to look at the positive side of this thing. If you want to see them uncensored, you still have the exhibitions or the publications. Life and art is not only on Instagram. So if you're curious about it, if to see the genuine artwork, come to my exhibitions or books and publication editorials, or there is some other way.
You managed to again answer my final question I was going to ask you before I asked it, which is quite impressive. But I was going to see also if there's anything you would suggest to other artists if their work is being censored online and it's frustrating them and they feel like it's affecting their progress. Is there any other spaces offline besides what you've already mentioned that you would advise artists look at where they're able to share their work, it still be seen, and they don't need to censor it?
Well, I don't think I'm good into giving advice, because the best advice I can give is to never listen to advice. That's the way you make your own road, your own career. There is no recipe. If there would be one, everybody would be successful and whatever. But there is no recipe. So that's also the beautiful side of this life. It's that you always have to invent yourself, to find a solution to show your work. Yeah, do exhibitions and hopefully sometimes make some books or to be visible. There is some other way, but to be honest, today it is difficult to be visible without those social media. So yeah, but there is lots of things to do in real life, and especially exhibitions, but it asks time, it asks, lots of effort, lots of failures, lots of fails, lots of... That's the way it is. It's not an easy job.
Brilliant. No, definitely not. It's great to hear about your journey. And I have one final question, which is unrelated to your career. It's a tradition that I've started on Art versus the Algorithm, where I have a list of 5 body parts. I want you to pick one of the body parts from this list, and each one corresponds to a question. I'll ask you that question. Those questions have been made by previous guests that have been on the podcast. They've suggested those questions. So once I've asked you that question, I'll ask you then after the podcast to fill in the gap with a question of your own. So you have to choose from one of these 5 options, either eyes, legs, boobs, bum, or hips.
The eyes.
If you could ask a genie, like a magic genie, to change one thing about your art discipline, what would it be?
Go away. I like my mistakes.
That's a great answer. I like that. Thanks for talking to me on the podcast. And also thank you for creating such beautiful and delicate work. I've really connected with it. I love doing the research. This conversation has been really inspiring, just to see the extent of your knowledge and your dedication to your craft. So I hope one day I'm able to see your work in person and not just over the internet.
Art versus the algorithm. So, which side are you on? You've been listening to Art versus the Algorithm, hosted and produced by Will Preisner, edited by Robbie Mortimer, voiceover by Alexia Kombu, and music by Ned Wolfgang Kelly.